running, and any anxieties that we might have around planning or what might happen. And we can create whole stories about what might happen and stories about stories. We could let go of anxiety about the past, regrets. And we could let go of our ideas of happiness. Because sometimes just our ideas of happiness can prevent us from accessing what is available authentically now to be happy. Sometimes our ideas of happiness, big red car, new fridge, whatever, 21-day retreat at Plum Village. In the future, then if we're not balanced and stable here in this present moment, we might be inclined towards our idea of happiness. And the risk there is that we might overlook what's available now to be focusing our vision and our attention on our idea of happiness. And we may think, I'll be happy when, and more dangerously we might think, I'll only be happy when. And it could be that this is a genuine thing, it's something that we really would gain joy and happiness from. But it would be a shame to waste all of these moments as we progress there towards only having happiness in the future when we arrive. And it may be that when we arrive, it wasn't a genuine thing. And then all of this time has been lost to us. And perhaps it's also unrealistic to expect that when we do arrive at this thing, that if all of our being has been somewhat inclined to the future and reaching and vision forward, that we will immediately be able to come up into our balance in order to understand and appreciate what it is now. The risk is that we move on to the next thing, because this is our way of being. So actually developing this, our ability to be present now, to be soft and open to the many, many conditions of happiness that we have now. Whether we know what they are or whether we see them because we are present. And we know that when we arrive and we are present, then the world arrives and is present in all of its complexity and beauty, all of its opportunities right now. And unless we are here, then we cannot truly understand what else is amazing that's here. So it's good to have vision, ambition, plans. But let's be careful about our ideas of happiness and how we spend our present moment. And sometimes our ideas of happiness need to be reviewed because we might have had them from when we were 10. And they may not be so appropriate now to who we are now. And what do we mean by joy and happiness? The Buddha gave us an example of a man who was walking in a dry place, perhaps a desert or a wilderness, and in the distance he saw green foliage and the glint of water, and he felt so dry, so thirsty, and joy came up in him at that vision of water. So joy has in it an aspect of anticipation and brings with it some energy. so that we can get to that place more easily. Perhaps also some excitement and joy. And then when he reached the place and knelt down and had his drink of water, he experienced happiness. And so happiness has in it a feeling of fulfillment, contentment, of well-being, of enough. It's a place of plenty to come with. Our cup is full. We have much to offer the world. And it has in it a sense of peace. So maybe when we think that we're coming on retreat, we're all pilgrims on the path, and sometimes the path can be dry and dusty, and sometimes it can be easy. And a retreat is like a hostel on the way. It's a place to step off and rest, and to check our compass bearing a little bit, have some nourishment from our friends on the path, take some rest. The retreat is like that. And so we see the hostel in the distance, we feel that sense of joy going on retreat. And then actually when we're on retreat, we can feel that happiness, that sense of being nourished by the practice, sense of fulfillment. The seed of peace is watered in us, and happiness has that quality. And the word is sukha that we're given to describe that kind of happiness. S-U-K-K-H-A. And the other word that we know that sounds a bit like that is dukkha, which is the balancing opposite. So dukkha is something to do with our suffering, a kind of restless energy that stops us from being happy in the moment, a sense of discontent. And they are our two familiar friends, the dukkha and the sukha. And sometimes with happiness, it can be something that we think we might just encounter along the way, something a bit random, something that we might bump into if we meet the right person, or we're on holiday, or things are good at work, and so the joy and happiness that we get from those external circumstances is one thing, but we can also have an inner cultivation of joy and happiness that's then not dependent so much on external circumstances. So good to take happiness seriously, not something it's not something just frivolous to come and go in our lives, but something to be open to. And the Dhammapada, which is a collection of, burping up my cornflakes, a collection of verses, of sort of poetic verse that was written about the teaching of the Buddha, tells us a little bit about happiness and general well-being. Think not lightly of good, saying it will not come to me. Drop by drop is the water pot filled. Likewise, the wise one, gathering it little by little, fills themselves with good. So it's really important to turn to what's wholesome and beautiful and true, and to be soft and open to those conditions of happiness, to take in the opportunities that we come to every day. And it can just be, something, snowdrops growing in our garden. Somebody making an effort that we recognize. The smile of a child, hearing the bird song when we were sitting this morning. And all of these things which drop by drop as the water pot fill. And not to it's so easy to skate past them in our lives, to think that we're into the serious business of dealing with our suffering, which we are. But this is also a good way to maintain that balance. And the teaching gives us a really concrete way of working with cultivating that inner well-being, that sense of positivity. First noble truth, there is suffering. There is suffering. We all know that. And so actually balancing that, so turning to the wholesome, is so helpful. And that teaching is the teaching of diligence. Such a lovely word. It's a word, such an unfortunate word, really. I think of diligence, we can think of it as something a bit tough and a bit miserable. But actually, diligence always goes with ease. And so we make an effort, but we always make that effort with ease in our mind and our body, so that we can make that effort in an appropriate way. And we have this image of our consciousness. And here is our mind consciousness. And here is our store consciousness. And down here, in our store consciousness, there are seeds. Seeds of wholesome mental formations, and we'll talk more about slightly unusual word later, and seeds of unwholesome mental formations. And in the practice of diligence, the first practice is to water positive seeds. And when we water a positive seed, up comes a beautiful flower in our mind consciousness. And that gives a fragrance, a perfume, a pleasantness to our life. Our mind consciousness full of beautiful flowers, how lovely is that? And so watering positive seeds, taking in the good drop by drop, turning to the good, opening to the good. Mary Oliver said, allowing the soft animal of your body to love what it loves. So important. Let's take happiness seriously. And the second practice of diligence is to avoid, no, it's not that. It's that when positive seeds come up, we encourage them. Can you read my writing? When positive seeds do come up, we encourage them to stay. And so, in order to be able to encourage them to stay, we have to have some understanding about why they came up. So that requires us to look carefully at the causes and the conditions that allowed those positive seeds to come up. So how were they touched? And what allowed them to rise? And what will allow them to stay for longer? And that requires some intelligent investigation on our part, because we are all so different. And so, what is a positive condition to me may not be a positive condition to you, and vice versa. And so people are so varied in their needs. And as well as the wholesome seeds, sometimes we might touch on an unwholesome seed. And so up comes a little spiky number in our mind consciousness. Perhaps this is the seed of anger, and it's come up as just a little irritation. We haven't touched it, we've just touched it very lightly, just a little irritation. But our mind consciousness is all full of beautiful flowers, joy and happiness. But still we notice this little irritation. And that's because we often have something called a negative attention bias. So our mind, and this is very useful from an evolutionary point of view, our mind is attuned to notice and amplify the negative. So that's good because I'll see the snake in the grass before it comes. It might be a nice snake, it might not, but I will notice the snake. And that's been good because all of our forefathers was probably why we're here. Because many generations have survived to produce us. But we tend to notice the unfamiliar and the potentially threatening. Or we notice the unfamiliar and then need to decide whether it's potentially threatening. And in our modern world, things are coming at us fast, changing. There's lots and lots of faces, things, news stories, stuff that's very unfamiliar and changing fast. And so there's a lot of processing going on in our daily life. And with this negative attention bias, it's possible to spend a lot of time focusing on these things. So actually consciously turning to the good, the wholesome, the beautiful, the true, to give some sense of balance in our mind is very helpful. And the third practice of diligence is to avoid watering negative seeds. So we try to understand our own mind and body enough that we don't encourage these guys to come up. And when they do come up, the fourth practice is to encourage them to go back down. Now, this all requires a lot of self-knowledge. And the basis of looking at these things and understanding them, we come at it from a positive place. So the idea of watering these seeds of joy and happiness and filling our mind with that positive energy is that we can then turn to look at what's more difficult. And so sometimes when we think about this section of the sutra, rather than breathing in, I'm aware of my mental formations, we can also use the word feelings. And I've also heard Thay talk about pain here. Yeah, feelings, pain. And what is a mental formation? It's kind of a slightly, it's a word we might not hear in the co-op. It's a formation is something that is inherently impermanent. So it's formed of the causes and conditions that come together at that moment. So let's think of a physical formation. So I love making sandcastles. And so in the sandcastle, there's me, this is one condition, making the sandcastle. And I might have a stick that I found on the beach to help me make the sandcastle. And then there's the sand. And then there's how much water is in the sand, because if it's too dry, it doesn't work. And if it's too wet, it doesn't work. And then maybe there's some shells to make it beautiful. And so these are all causes and conditions that allow the sandcastle to come to be. And this is a physical formation. And a mental formation is the same. So if our sense of peace arises in our mind, there are reasons why that's come to be at this moment. Yeah? There are things that have slotted into place to allow that peace to arise. And there are supposed to be 51 mental formations traditionally. We don't get too stuck on the number because Thay's added a few, and different translations have different numbers. And joy and happiness are 2 of the 51. And often feelings, perceptions, which are also in the list, are pulled out in Buddhism as kind of worthy of special attention, as indeed they are. Our perception tends to make the world that we live in, and our feelings can take away our freedom. So, really good places to be focused in our awareness is our feelings and our perceptions. So often this sutra is thought of as aware of my feelings, I breathe in, aware of my feelings, I breathe out. Yeah? And feelings can be pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. And they tend to come about either from our body or from our mind. Yeah. And it's kind of fun in meditation to sit and just watch that river of feelings run through us and think, okay, that's a body one, that's a mind one, that's a body one, mind, body, mind, because they're coming that fast often. But really helpful, because part of understanding ourselves and what waters our own particular seeds is just noticing that they're there and that they're coming up. And the other reason that it's important to notice is because when we have feelings, they tend to lead to craving, i.e. grabbing onto the stuff, wanting it, pulling it towards us, or aversion. Don't want that one, distance, not having that one, not next to me. And these ones often are things that we would like to have all the time, and often we don't really want to have these guys at all. And so there's a risk as we go through our day that as all of these feelings come up, that there's all of this subtle or not so subtle pushing away and pulling towards and moving towards and moving away. And if we don't know, don't recognize them, name them, get familiar with them, they can just drive us, totally be in control, without us even being aware, particularly. And that's really powerful stuff. You know, who's living my life? Me, my feelings. So it's really interesting to watch them. And one thing that can come about with a feeling like this little spiky irritation, maybe a little irritation, can deal with that one. But if, say, something external or internal touches our seed of anger and it comes up in a bigger manifestation or anything we're not too comfy with, then there can be some fear around that. Fear of what's unfamiliar and uncomfortable. And actually then the last place we want to be is here in our mind with these spiky chaps. Yeah? And so we can look then outside. This drives us outside, to look outside. And I, and probably you, have all sorts of subtle and not so subtle avoidance techniques in order to not be there with my unpleasant feelings. Might blame someone else. We might get into an anxiety commentary about it all so that we don't have to be there. We might go and eat something or check our email, turn on the telly. So procrastination is a good one. Distraction. I'm sure between us we could write a really long list of what we do. And so in a way we have a choice. Do we become master of evasion, or do we become skillful at turning towards? Because fear is often about the unfamiliar. And so if I'm really scared of Russ here, then, maybe I don't want to look at him. Maybe I don't want to be in a room with him. But the way to deal with the unfamiliar is to become familiar. So to turn towards, to name, to recognize, to step towards, yeah? To get to know, to engage, to understand. This is the way to reduce the fear and to really understand our feelings, because they are part of us. They're not out there separate. I'd love to deny lots of my negative feelings, but they are part of me. And the non-judgmental element of mindfulness is so helpful. And Thay gives us this lovely image of embracing our negative feelings with mindfulness. And why is this so helpful? I wish I had another colour. So we have a seed of mindfulness. This is one of our wholesome seeds. And why do we walk mindfully down the corridor? Why do we feel the weight of our spoon with our cereal on it? One of the reasons is that we're then touching, in these actions, we're touching our seed of mindfulness. And it comes up, and as we practice every day, many moments as we can in the day, then our seed of mindfulness gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And we just need to touch it very lightly, and up it pops as our phone a friend, a helpful assistant. Because when we have something in our mind that is uncomfortable and we can touch this energy of mindfulness, then it can come up for us to be in our mind. And just like perfume, it can pervade and perfuse this spiky energy and allow understanding, some clarity, some calming energy, and non-judgmental, always non-judgmental. Acceptance. This is me. This is where I'm at. This is uncomfortable. Hello, my anger. I see you. I name you. Here we go again. Always coming back, just for me to deal with. And if we can turn to our unpleasant feelings like that with kindness and compassion, then we have a chance. We have a chance to engage with them in a positive way. And what does it mean to embrace to embrace something. And embrace is always particular. I can't embrace something in an off-the-peg way. An embrace is always specific to that individual, to that person, that thing. And to embrace, I need to open myself. I need to show my softness, my soft front in an embrace. And I step towards and open. That beautiful, beautiful Qigong movement that I love so much that Lesley shared. This stepping forward and opening. This is almost the first prerequisite of embrace. But even before that, we look at, we get some distant understanding of what are we going to embrace. And we name the particular, the specific, and mindfulness is always a mindfulness of something. We don't just have a vague fog of mindfulness. We have a light of awareness shining on the particular, mindfulness of something. And so I go to embrace, I name, I know, and I embrace, I step forward, I open my soft self, and I hold in an appropriate way with my embrace, the embrace of mindfulness, of our uncomfortable feeling. We don't go in for that cinch, and we don't sort of, not quite hold so that we drop. It's appropriate to the weight, the shape, the specificity of what we have in front of us. That's how we embrace. And the same is so true here. I have this specific pain in my mind. My response is caring, non-judgmental, specific. And maybe I can just do the first one. Maybe it is just scary, uncomfortable. Maybe I can just turn towards and look. Maybe I can name. Maybe it's not okay. Maybe I'm not up for the hug. And that's fine. That's really good. That's the first step. And then we come back and we can water more positive seeds. We can be with the Sangha. We can be with our supportive base. We can come back to our breath. We can inhabit our body. We can relax the tension in our body. And we can sit grounded in our practice. And then maybe we can revisit a little. And maybe that time we can step forward a fraction. And just work gently at our own pace with it. It's not a conflict. It's a negotiation. It's an intelligent engagement with resources that we have. And our practice of mindfulness, of mindfully washing up, mindfully driving, stopping at the red light, really stopping. I love red light meditation. Stop, Jane, stop. All of that just gives us the resources to step forward into this difficult territory. Nobody's denying that this is not challenging for all of us. And when we think about joy and pain, they're not separate. I think, I said earlier, it's nice to think that we want the good bits and we don't want the bad bits. And it takes courage to be happy. Because if we are really happy, then we are soft and open to that. And if we allow ourselves to be really seared by beauty, to really love until it hurts, The risk is that we make ourselves vulnerable, because if we feel that deeply, then we also know how to suffer. We know we will suffer. And sometimes it feels safer just to be a bit neutral, to not really feel what we feel. Because our joy and pain, like that thick honeysuckle growing up the apple tree, they're intertwined. I wrote that beautiful poem about hearing all my cries and laughter at once, so I can see that my joy and pain are one, and how closely interrelated they are. And Khalil Gibran in The Prophet, he spoke about how the lute, the beautiful sound of the lute, can bring us such joy and comfort. But the body of the lute is hollow, is carved with knives into the wood. And how these things are the interarm. So friends, I'd like just to end with a poem which says these things much beautifully than I can. And it's a poem by Kabir, who's I'm sure familiar to many of you, a 15th century Indian poet. And it's called Don't Go Outside. Don't go outside to see the flowers. My friend, don't bother with that excursion. Inside your body, there are flowers. One flower has 1,000 petals. That will do for a place to sit. Sitting there, you will have a glimpse of beauty inside the body and out of it, before gardens and after gardens.